I just jumped off a client call, and I figured I'd share some of the insights that we were able to create together, myself and pleasure to meet a guy named Tom today. And Tom wanted to connect with me because he heard about me through a friend of mine who I've been coaching with for some time. And Tom's issue has been that he doesn't feel connected to his wife anymore, or that they're having problems. And so, they've been together for a little over a decade now, and it's been a struggle in the past 2 years, especially because of so-called lockdown stuff and all those things, which are all real constraints. But what's really valuable that I wanted to share about that particular call that I just had was, like, what do you do about it? And so that's the answer to this question. So, like, let's say this is you've lost connection to your partner, and you're like, how do I get this connection back? Or is that what you want to do? Or maybe you're having this kind of thought where it's like, I'm not sure I'm going to get this connection back, and so therefore, should I even try, and should I go for connection elsewhere, and this kind of thing. Okay, and so I had a conversation with Tom for about 2 hours about this. And I'm going to speak on the side of the man. Okay, so as a man, part of the job about holding space for someone, and that's not holding space in terms of like some delusional spiritual attribute, but that's literally what I mean by that, is like allowing someone to have their space, allowing someone to be who they are. And one of the things that we'll do in relationships is very often we'll expect or want the other person to change, right? So it's like, and because we see suffering. This is one of the most common things that I talk to in relationships, where someone sees suffering and they're like, I know they're suffering and I want to advise and I want to help them and I want to fix it. But what we don't really understand is, on the other side of that is, I want to fix that so I get something out of it. So I win, or I feel important, or I feel significant, right? Which therefore we are changing them so that we can benefit, while assuming that they're going to benefit, and that never almost works. It almost never works. I talk to lots of people, and this comes up a lot for people who want to do relationship counseling, and I'm a work in progress also, right? So I don't have the perfect relationship. What relationship is perfect? Therefore, I think I do have the perfect relationship, actually, because it's perfectly imperfect in some way. But what I know is that it's an opportunity for growth and maturity, and also fun, and all sorts of great feelings and stuff, and intellectual pursuits and ideas, and like it's a learning curve. It's not one-stop shop. Like, it's not, well, now that I'm in a relationship, it's going to be great forever. It's like, no, that's not how it works. But it is an opportunity for growth. And so the first thing is that everyone wants to grow in some way. But one of the most important steps to growth is being heard and being listened to, and being not made wrong for your position, but having your position clearly heard out. Because when it's been shown, I was watching a political article today where they're talking about how when a person in a power position has a desire to understand people, that people who feel understood will do things, even things that go against themselves, more often just because they felt heard. And so when you allow someone to feel heard, you actually create the space for their own transformation, because they no longer are fighting to be heard. They are heard. And then they get to live on the other side of being heard, which they've never had the opportunity to do. And it turns out, in Tom's case, and I'm just sharing it for anyone here watching, who are in this position, who might find themselves doing this very same thing, where it's like, I want the other person to change, or I want to fix the other person, or I see them in pain and they're suffering, or I see their pattern, or I see their programming, or I see whatever's going wrong with their life, and I want to fix it because I know how to fix it, and blah, 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 blah. I want you to go a little deeper with that, because you might find that your addiction to fixing them is actually for you, not for them. And what you might find out is actually more valuable is to just listen to who they are. Like, so what if they're delusional? So what if they're not getting it? So what if they could be thinking better? The point of reality and appreciating someone for who they are is to embrace who they are. not accept it, but embrace them for being that way, so that they know they're heard and they're okay for feeling the way they feel. And you know what? What I've found, which is inherently useful for this topic, is that every time I do that, the partner who I'm doing that with ends up coming back to me later on, or even during that same conversation somehow, and they'll say these magical words, and hear these magical words. Is that right? Why is this important? Well, because most people in conversations and relationships, one of the major dysfunctions of a relationship that causes a lot of problems, including money problems in a relationship, is a lack of understanding about how to communicate to the other person. And so often we're just communicating with ourselves, and we're expecting the other person to be different, and we're wanting and just fantasizing about this perfect situation where you'll want it to deal with any of their suffering or yours. And I've taken a different approach in my life. I've come to realize that through a lot of hardship, and also my ex-girlfriend actually taught me this lesson very deeply, is that a relationship is a partnership where you get to help each other essentially through suffering. You get to help each other, which means suffering is by default. That doesn't mean that suffering has to have a negative connotation. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that it's wiser to approximate the idea that if you love someone for suffering, and if you love someone for being where they're at, and if you appreciate where they're at, and honor that, and listen to that, and allow that to be heard, and allow that to be expressed, so that they feel heard and they can just download and get all this energy out of their body and get all these thoughts and emotions out on the table. And then have you compassionately, with empathy, reciprocate that and see, yeah, I see where you're at. I see where you're at. Without any agenda to change them, what you'll find is that they will actually come to the table after they've expressed themselves, and they'll be like, is that right? Like, am I thinking right? Is this okay for me to think this way? Like, because it feels wrong for me to think this way, and so therefore I'm just asking, like, would you do anything different? Like, how would you help this? Because here's the thing: most people who you might think are delusional are exactly delusional. They even think themselves are delusional. They're like, God damn, am I right? Like, what the hell's happening? But the reality is that when they're in existential crisis, when they are in a split mind, when they're in their own dynamic and they can't decide between one or the other, that's exactly it. They can't decide. And so when you're trying to impose as a partner onto this person, your partner, the idea that they should decide differently now because you see them suffering while they're already suffering, well, now it's like, hey, I see you suffering and I'm going to cause you to suffer with now the decision to change. So I'm going to cause some more suffering, hoping that that's going to solve the issue. The reality is that your job in a relationship is almost to be a suffering sponge, where it's like, hey, suffer for me, suffer with me, I'll take that, I'll suffer with you, and I'll love you for it. Because it's just where you're at. It's just where they're at. It's just where you're at. There's nowhere to go until someone decides. And you might find that if you take that approach, then the other person comes up and they'll be like, is that right? Like, what do you suggest? How would you approach this? You know? And it's way better to have that person come to you and ask to be helped than you just dominate them with your intellect or your superiority or whatever the hell you think could help their situation. It's one of the most valuable things you'll learn in the relationship is how to communicate that way rather than change first. Now, on top of that, you know, it gets very easy to get into that game of I'm going to change this person, and I just need to change this person, and this person just needs to change so that I don't feel the way I feel around this person. And I'm not going to say that how you feel is wrong. I think how you feel around whoever it is exactly right for them and for you. But there's a difference between needing them to change for you and inviting change to occur where you're not attached to it. And the way to get not attached to the need for change is actually to appreciate. And I know that might sound hokey, and I know that might sound like insulting to your intelligence, but what I'm certain of is that most people spend zero time appreciating their life. Because when I ask people on my webinar or in a presentation, how many people here have spent, if I were to look at your calendar right now, how many of you have 1 hour slotted midweek in the evening that's dedicated purely to appreciating your life and appreciating yourself and appreciating other people in your life? And you've shown up to that hour weekly for the last 52 weeks. How many people would say that they've got that in their calendar? And most people say, no, I'm definitely failing that test, right? Which just tells me that most people have a problem with this. Most people don't do it enough. And so therefore, it's very easy when you don't appreciate what's already going well in your relationship, or you don't appreciate your partner for what they're already doing in your relationship, and you don't appreciate yourself for what you're already doing in your relationship. If you don't have a level of appreciation for any of those things, it's very easy to get caught into the delusion that you should change or they should change to help you feel better. And in actuality, that's probably doing more harm than good, because it's easier to appreciate someone for what they're doing right and polarize your psychology that way and really focus on that and appreciate that. Because when you do that, it's easier to see a person in their own delusion, or see a person be stuck with a problem, or see a person be stuck with stress or whatever it is. It's easier to have that experience when you appreciate who they are, because you don't need them to change, because you're like, hey, I abundantly appreciate everything else you're doing. Why do I need you to not suffer in this right now? I'm going to listen to you because I appreciate what's over here. And so what that really means is that most relationship dysfunction occurs when one person isn't doing a good enough job in appreciation. And you might think that's hokey, and you might think that's just too easy and too simple, and you might even think that's me judging you. And I assure you that's not where that comes from. But it is an observation, and it's one of my tenets in my life, is to focus on what a person's already doing well, and just have an abundance of that, so I can hold them to a standard, and also hold myself to a standard, and hold myself to a consciousness standard of, I'm not missing out on anything. Why the hell would you want to live your life in the perception of you're missing things? Why not just see the abundance for what it is? Now, that might be harder than most people for lots of situations. You know, that's difficult. I'm not stepping on you, and I'm not saying that your experience isn't significant. But what I am going to fight for, and what I'm going to suggest to anyone, is if you appreciate your life, if you find something to appreciate, you might find more. In the same way as you find something to hate, you might find more. If you find something to criticize, you'll find more, guaranteed. Why? Because whatever you put focus on is what you're going to get good at focusing on. And so therefore, as a camera person, I'm a camera person, and as a camera person in your own life, where you're just lensing your reality, you now get to make a choice. Do you want to lens your reality in the continuation of hatred and condemnation and resentment? Or do you want to lens yourself differently and focus a little differently on what is actually already there also, which is a focusing on what's already going well and what you're already doing good at, and just expand that? And what if you spent more time focusing on that as opposed to trying to fix everything you don't appreciate? It's food for thought. Anyway, wanted to share that one. It is Monday, so I get some more videos up this week. Thank you for watching. Hope that was helpful. If it is helpful, put a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. If you're challenged and have a question for me, or you're like, Steve, how do I solve this issue? I've got this issue, I don't know what to do. Put it in the comments. It's a fodder for me in new content this week, and I'd be very grateful for your support in that agenda, so I can serve the community in its finest. So therefore, thank you for watching. See you next one.